This particular royal was left steaming because apparently she'd been assured of her place in, some people might say, historical pop culture. As ever, let me explain. Morning, chums, nice to see you. Hope you're all right. Doesn't this look gorgeous? It's just beautiful, isn't it? Somebody said to me the other day, what a nice setting. It is, that's why I like coming here. It's discreet and it's quiet and it's safe. You know, I have to be very careful, as you can imagine, at the moment over here in London because there's so many bike thieves and, stuff like that. There was a story in the paper a couple of days ago now, basically saying they're putting in this technology to stop people from jumping the gates at the tubes and all that sort of stuff. That's the London Underground, if you don't know that expression. And the thing is, it's ridiculous. It's not about that. It's not the technology. It's the manpower. You know, people. There's plenty of staff stood around doing nothing at many tube stations, but they're told by the Mayor of London not to do anything. Yes, but the taxpayers like you and me, who are law-abiding and buy tickets, we get stung for the extra fares for these people they let walk through. It's just ridiculous, isn't it? Something needs to be done. I know what I'd be doing. Yeah. BAT, you get the picture? But there you go. Moving forward, let me explain this about our story of the day. Now, what I found fascinating when I sat down with a wonderful Hollywood actor, Tony Curtis, was this. All of the things that he'd achieved in his career, of course, holding the beautiful Marilyn Monroe in Some Like It Hot and being in so many great films. One of my particular favourites, in fact, which is free to watch online, chums, if you want to watch, is Houdini with his wife, Janet Leigh. It's just brilliant. You know, it really is captivating. Tony did say they played around with the story a little bit. It wasn't exactly the story. But when you're younger, the one where he climbs in the tank, frightening, you know. But no, you just think, no, I can't watch that. But Tony pointed out that many people did, he became very friendly with the British monarchy over here, and in particular Princess Margaret, who he met at a number of occasions, who apparently liked him a lot, according to Tony. He was never shy, you know, Tony Curtis. He told you exactly who the women who sort of tapped him on the shoulder, that sort of thing, you know. And he said he got on incredibly well with Princess Margaret, and she was totally across his films, pop culture, all of that sort of stuff. Now, what's fascinating when you look at the stories of that, you have to remember just what a big pop icon Tony Curtis was, because, you know, there was Elvis, and then, of course, there was Tony Curtis, and there was Burt Lancaster, Tab Hunter, all of that generation. And Tony was famous for his very infamous look of the DA. You know what I'm talking about, girls, men, yeah, you remember? The DA haircut, you know. We won't say it, it's a family channel, but you get the picture. And I said, oh, wow. And he said, literally everybody copied it, you know. And he didn't realise what he'd started because clearly, you know, he said he just saw it picked up in magazines. That's the reason why the very young Beatles at that time were very influenced by Tony Curtis and his look, particularly in the Hamburg years, as they called them. And that's how he ended up on the iconic Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Heart Club's Band album cover. You know, the one that's got everybody on. I don't know if you know this, it's always great to share, but Mae West only allowed her visionary to appear if, of course, the Beatles would work with her. And there were two things that she managed to get out of the Beatles. I'll let you know those in another episode. But what's fascinating is many were sort of stunned and, you know, annoyed that they weren't included, all that sort of stuff. Names like, of course, Mamie Van Doren, Diana Dawes, Oscar Wilde, everybody like that made the cut. However, Princess Margaret thought she was going to be included as well. In fact, she'd been told this. And Tony Curtis said to me that she, you know, over dinner had said, oh yes, you know, she'd heard it. And it was a big thing. You've got to remember, the swinging 60s, the Beatles out with their most eclectic album of that point, you know, with all the new sounds being recorded at Abbey Road. And there were stories that the Queen apparently would feature on the front cover too. What actually happened was the Queen wasn't too keen on her imagery being used. You have to remember, this is, as I say, the swinging 60s, love, romance, all of that sort of stuff, druggy culture, and apparently Buckingham Palace very, you know, sternly pointed out, well, you know, it wouldn't necessarily be the right thing. Clearly, I don't think the Queen was still fizzing about the fact that John Lennon decided to return his medal, remember? So I think that was a return to that. Princess Margaret, though, who saw herself as the epicenter of pop culture, wasn't having it. You know, she thought, no, I like this idea. I wouldn't mind being on this. And up until the point of release, she thought that was going to be the case. And the problem was that when the cover came out and she wasn't on it, well, she went fizzing, as you can imagine. And Tony Curtis told me that years later, meeting her, he said, well, You know, she was really angry to the point where apparently she wrote to John Lennon and said, "I thought I would have been included on this." And he wrote back, and apparently this is, you know, folklore, but this is what Tony Curtis told me, that they were only picking people of cultural interest. And now that could have been John Lennon's humour, as we know he was a bit tricky to say the least. But apparently Princess Margaret instantly dumped all of her Beatles collection records out of her radiogram and decided they were no longer to be discussed with her in that particular presence. Now I don't know why they didn't include it, because it would make perfect sense. But of course, maybe equally, they only just wanted the Queen. But John Lennon had blown that opportunity by sending, as I say, his medal back. And perhaps they decided, well, once the Queen had rejected their offer, why should they take the Queen's sister? Either way, that is the story via Tony Curtis of what truly happened behind the scenes of the iconic Sgt. Pepper's front cover. Who was your favourite person included on the album? As ever, let me know. And did you buy it? Neil Shawn, Kensington, London.